She had exactly 3.2 seconds to decide. Let the blade reach her student's throat or reveal that she wasn't really dead. The obituary in the Navy Times had been convincing. Purple Heart recipient, 2 tours in Afghanistan, KIA during Operation Neptune's Trident. But Lieutenant Commander Elena Reaper Santos hadn't died in that Kandahar compound in 2018. She'd just gotten tired of killing. Now, 5 years later, teaching yoga to soccer moms and office workers, she'd almost convinced herself that the woman who'd earned her call sign by putting 13 Taliban fighters in body bags during a single night raid was gone forever. But muscle memory is a bitch. And the psycho with the hunting knife who just crashed through her studio window was about to learn why they used to call her the Reaper. Because some skills don't fade. Some instincts can't be meditated away. And when you've spent 2 years as the Navy's most lethal female operator, 5 years of teaching downward dog and doesn't make you less dangerous. It just makes you better at hiding it. The glass exploded inward. Her students screamed. And Lieutenant Commander Elena Santos opened her eyes for the first time in half a decade. Time to go to work. Marcus Webb had been watching for 3 weeks, timing everything perfectly. Tuesday night classes ended at 8:30. The parking lot would be dark. The students would be relaxed, vulnerable, distracted. Perfect hunting conditions. He'd picked the right victim, too. Sarah Mitchell was exactly his type. Pretty, professional, the kind of woman who probably had never faced real violence. The restraining order she'd filed just proved how naive she was. Paper couldn't protect her. The law couldn't save her. But what Webb hadn't researched was Emma Sinclair. If he dug deeper, he might have found the discrepancies. The yoga instructor who'd appeared in their small Virginia town exactly 5 years ago with no social media history, no family photos, no past beyond a few carefully forged documents. He might have wondered why a woman who preached peace and love had the situational awareness of a combat veteran, why her eyes constantly swept for exits and threats, why she moved with the unconscious precision of someone trained to kill. Webb had no idea that Emma Sinclair was a ghost, a carefully constructed identity built over the grave of Lieutenant Commander Elena Santos, the naval special warfare operator who'd been officially declared KIA after her team was overrun in a Taliban stronghold outside Kandahar. The Pentagon had held a closed casket ceremony. Her teammates from SEAL Team 6 had carried the empty box. Her commanding officer had handed her mother a folded flag while explaining that Elena had died as she lived, protecting others. But Elena hadn't died in that mud brick compound. She'd crawled out 3 days later, covered in blood that wasn't all hers, carrying intelligence that would dismantle the largest Taliban weapons cache in southern Afghanistan. The mission was so classified that officially it never happened, and the woman who'd completed it officially never existed. Elena Santos died on paper so that Emma Sinclair could live in peace. Now, as Webb's boot found purchase on the shattered window frame, as his wild eyes locked onto Sarah's terrified face, as the hunting knife gleamed in the soft studio lighting, that peace was about to end, and the most dangerous woman the Navy had ever produced was about to remember exactly who she used to be. Welcome to Quiet Tales Studio. Before we dive into this explosive story of buried warriors and deadly awakenings, tell us where you're watching from, and smash that subscribe button if you believe some guardian angels learned their skills in hell. The sound of breaking glass cut through the meditation music like a scream. 15 heads snapped toward the windows. 15 peaceful faces suddenly etched with confusion and fear. Emma's eyes went cold, not with panic, but with something far more dangerous. Recognition. She'd been expecting this. For 3 weeks, she'd noticed the watchers. Different men, different positions, but the same purpose. Professional surveillance. Someone had found her. But this wasn't her past catching up. This was something else entirely. Marcus Webb burst through the shattered window, shards of glass falling around him like deadly rain. In his right hand, an 8-inch hunting knife caught the candlelight. His eyes were wild, unfocused, locked on one target among the terrified students. "Sarah!" he screamed, his voice cracking with months of suppressed rage. "You can't hide from me anymore!" The students scattered like frightened birds. Yoga mats flew, water bottles crashed to the floor, and someone's keys jangled as they hit the hardwood. But Sarah Mitchell remained frozen in place, her face white with terror as she recognized the nightmare that had been stalking her for months. Emma moved. Not like a yoga instructor, not like a woman seeking inner peace. She moved like what she'd once been, a weapon trained to eliminate threats with surgical precision. "Everyone down!" The command exploded from her lips with such authority that every person in the room, including Webb, instinctively dropped. The gentle, melodic voice was gone, replaced by something that had once directed combat operations in the most dangerous places on Earth. Webb recovered first, his obsession overriding his confusion. He lunged toward Sarah, who was crawling desperately toward the exit. The blade arced downward and met Emma's forearm instead. The yoga instructor had appeared between them like a ghost, absorbing the knife strike with a defensive technique that sent shockwaves through Webb's arm. But what shocked him more was her face. Gone was the serene expression her students knew. This was the face of someone who had killed before and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. "Wrong move," Emma said quietly. What happened next unfolded with a precision that seemed impossible for someone who spent her days teaching downward dogs and meditation breathing. Emma's right hand shot up, palm striking Webb's wrist with surgical accuracy. The knife flew across the room, clattering against the exposed brick wall. Before he could process the disarmament, her left elbow drove into his solar plexus, folding him forward. "Sarah, stairs, now," Emma barked without taking her eyes off Webb. Webb was stronger than her, maybe 60 pounds heavier, but he was fighting someone who had once taken down insurgents in close quarters combat. As he swung wildly, Emma ducked under his arm, pivoted on her left foot, and drove her knee into his kidney with enough force to drop an elephant. He stumbled, but didn't go down. Desperation and rage kept him upright as he grabbed for Emma's hair, trying to use her flowing auburn locks as a weapon against her. Bad choice. Emma's hands came up in a movement that looked almost like a prayer pose, until she twisted sharply, breaking his grip and simultaneously striking pressure points on both sides of his neck. Webb's vision blurred, his legs suddenly unsteady. "Who sent you?" Emma demanded, her voice carrying an edge that made several students who were still watching from the stairway shiver. "What?" Webb gasped, confused. "Nobody sent me. I love her. I love Sarah." Emma's eyes narrowed. Not a professional threat then, just a disturbed man whose obsession had turned violent. In some ways, that made him more dangerous. Unpredictable, emotionally driven, no training to fall back on. He charged again, this time trying to tackle her to the ground. Emma sidestepped like a matador, grabbed his extended arm, and used his own momentum to send him crashing into the mirror that covered the studio's west wall. Glass exploded outward, and Webb hit the floor hard, blood streaming from multiple cuts. But he wasn't finished. Stalkers never were. As Emma turned to check on her students, Webb grabbed a large shard of mirror glass and lunged at her back. Sarah screamed a warning just as Emma spun, her reflexes honed by years of combat training. The glass shard stopped inches from her throat, held in Webb's trembling hand. But Emma's hand was wrapped around his wrist, and the pressure she was applying made tendons stand out like cables under his skin. "You have one chance," Emma said, her voice deadly calm. "Walk away. Get help. Never come near any of my students again." Webb's response was to try to headbutt her. Emma had had enough. The movement was too fast for most of the students to follow. One moment Webb was standing with the glass shard, the next he was on the ground, unconscious, his arm bent at an angle that suggested it would need professional medical attention. Emma stood over him, breathing steady, not even winded. Blood from a small cut on her forearm dripped onto the hardwood floor, the only sign that she'd been in a fight at all. "Someone call 911, she said, her voice already returning to its normal, gentle tone. "Tell them we need police and an ambulance." As sirens wailed in the distance, 15 yoga students stared at their instructor with expressions ranging from awe to terror to complete bewilderment. The woman they thought they knew, gentle Emma, who spoke in soft tones about chakras and inner peace, had just dismantled an armed attacker with the efficiency of a seasoned warrior. Sarah was the first to find her voice. "Emma, how did you—" "Self-defense classes," Emma replied quickly. But her eyes were already scanning the room for additional threats. Old habits died hard. "Everyone okay? Anyone hurt?" But Michael Chen, a software engineer who'd been coming to Tuesday classes for 2 years, shook his head slowly. "That wasn't self-defense class moves, Emma. I've seen enough MMA to know the difference. You fought like—" He trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. "Like someone who's done this before," completed Jessica Rodriguez, a nurse who worked emergency room shifts and had seen her share of violence. "That was military training, special forces training." Emma's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Around her, the students she'd grown to care about over the years were putting pieces together that she'd hoped would never fit. "The way you moved," whispered Tom Bradley, a retired police officer who joined the class on his doctor's recommendation for stress relief. "The commands you gave, the techniques you used. Ma'am, with all due respect, I've worked with ex-military, and you're not just ex-military. You're something else entirely." Emma said nothing, but Sarah noticed her teacher's hands that had just prevented a knife from reaching her throat, were trembling slightly, not from adrenaline, from something deeper, fear, but not of the unconscious man on the floor, fear of exposure. "We deserve to know who you really are," said Lisa Park, a local attorney whose legal instincts were fully engaged. "You just saved Sarah's life, probably all our lives. But you also just showed us that everything we thought we knew about you was incomplete," Emma finished quietly. The sirens were getting closer now. Soon there would be police reports, witness statements, media attention. Emma's carefully constructed new life was about to be examined under a microscope she'd spent 5 years avoiding. The police arrived with their usual chaos of flashing lights and urgent voices. Paramedics checked Webb for serious injuries, while officers began separating witnesses for individual statements. Detective Ray Morrison, a 20-year veteran who'd seen every kind of violence the city had to offer, found himself particularly interested in the yoga instructor who'd single-handedly neutralized an armed stalker. "Ma'am, I need to ask you some questions about what happened here tonight," Morrison said, approaching Emma with the measured caution of someone who recognized dangerous competence when he saw it. Emma nodded, wrapping a towel around her bleeding forearm. "Of course, Detective. Your students tell me you handled this situation with what they described as military precision. Care to comment on that?" Around them, the other students were giving their statements, but Emma could feel their attention focused on her conversation with the detective. The moment of truth had arrived. "I served in the Navy," Emma said finally. "I received combat training." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "What kind of combat training teaches someone to disarm a knife-wielding attacker that efficiently? And I notice you haven't told me your full name yet." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, as if saying goodbye to something precious. When she opened them again, her students saw a different person entirely. The soft curves of her face seemed harder, her posture more rigid, her eyes carrying depths they'd never noticed before. "Lieutenant Commander Elena Santos," she said, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Navy Special Warfare. I was part of an experimental program integrating women into SEAL operations." The studio fell silent except for the crackling of police radios and the distant sound of Webb being loaded into an ambulance. "You're a Navy SEAL?" Sarah whispered, the words barely audible. "Was." Elena corrected. "I left that life behind 5 years ago." Detective Morrison was taking notes, but his expression suggested he was more interested in what wasn't being said. "And you ended up teaching yoga in our little town because I wanted peace," Elena replied. And for the first time since the attack, her voice carried the gentle tone her students remembered. "I wanted to help people find calm instead of—" She gestured toward the broken glass and bloodstains. "Instead of this." Tom Bradley, the retired cop, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I don't know what operations you were involved in, and I don't need to know. But I've got a daughter Sarah's age, and if someone like that psycho ever came after her, I'd pray there was someone like you around to stop it." One by one, her students began to nod in agreement. The fear in their eyes was being replaced by something else. Understanding, respect, gratitude. "So what happens now?" asked Michael Chen. "Do you disappear again? Find another town? Another identity?" Elena looked around the studio she'd built with her own hands. The sanctuary where she'd found purpose in teaching instead of destroying. The place where she'd discovered that her strength could be used to build people up instead of taking them down. "I don't know," she admitted. "This kind of attention, it's exactly what I came here to avoid." "Then we don't give it attention," said Lisa Park firmly. "As far as anyone outside this room knows, you're a yoga instructor who took some self-defense classes and got lucky. The rest is none of their business." Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. "You saved my life tonight. You risked everything, your secret, your peace, your new life, to protect me. Why?" Elena smiled, and for the first time since the attack, it was the gentle, serene expression her students knew and loved. "Because this is who I chose to become. A protector, a teacher, a woman who helps others find strength, whether through meditation or—" She glanced at the unconscious Webb. other means. Will you stay? Jessica asked. Will you keep teaching us? Elena looked around at the faces surrounding her. These people had seen her at her most dangerous, had learned that everything they thought they knew about her was built on carefully maintained lies, and they were asking her to stay. If you'll have me, she said quietly, but no more secrets, no more lies. You deserve to know who's teaching you. We already know who you are, said Tom Bradley. You're Emma. You're our teacher. You're the woman who keeps us safe. The rest is just details. 6 months later, Serenity Springs Yoga Studio then had a waiting list 3 months long. Word had somehow gotten out, not about Elena's military background, but about the instructor who'd protected her students from a dangerous stalker. Women from across the county came seeking not just yoga instruction, but the confidence that came from learning from someone who truly understood strength. Elena had made some changes to her curriculum. Alongside traditional yoga poses, she now offered awareness and safety workshops that taught her students to trust their instincts, recognize dangerous situations, and, if necessary, defend themselves. She was careful never to reveal more than appropriate about her background, but her students learned that true peace came not from avoiding the world's dangers, but from being prepared to face them. Sarah Mitchell became her assistant instructor, having discovered a passion for helping other women find their own strength. The stalking incident had changed her, but not in the way Marcus Webb had intended. Instead of becoming a victim, she'd become an advocate. And on Tuesday evenings, when Elena guided her advanced class through their poses, she sometimes caught glimpses of her reflection in the new mirrors that had replaced the broken ones. The woman looking back was neither Lieutenant Commander Elena Santos nor the completely fabricated Emma Sinclair. She was something new, something authentic. She was a warrior who had found peace without surrendering her strength. A teacher who could offer protection as well as wisdom. A woman who had learned that sometimes the best way to help others find their center was to be willing to lose your own, but only when it truly mattered. And as she watched her students grow stronger, more confident, more aware of their own power, Elena knew she had finally found what she'd been searching for when she'd left the military behind. Purpose, community, home. Sometimes the path to peace led through the very battles you thought you'd left behind. And sometimes, Elena had learned, that was exactly where it was supposed to lead. The next Tuesday, a new student joined the advanced class. She was young, nervous, and kept glancing toward the windows as if expecting danger. During the cool-down meditation, she approached Elena with hesitant steps. "I heard about what happened here," she whispered. "I heard you stopped someone who was like my ex-boyfriend. I need to learn to protect myself." Elena looked into the young woman's frightened eyes and saw herself 5 years ago, someone seeking peace, but afraid she'd lost the strength to find it. "What's your name?" Elena asked gently. "Amanda." "Well, Amanda," Elena smiled, "let's start with some breathing exercises. And then, if you're interested, I can teach you about finding your warrior pose." Because some lessons Elena had learned were too important to keep secret, and some teachers were meant to do more than just show others how to find peace. They were meant to show them how to protect it. Have you ever met someone who seemed one way on the surface, but turned out to be something completely unexpected? Someone whose quiet strength ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. Tell us about them in the comments below. And if you believe stories of hidden heroes and unexpected courage deserve to be shared, subscribe to Quiet Tales Studio. We're here every week with stories that remind us that extraordinary people often wear the most ordinary disguises. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most peaceful people are the ones who've learned when peace isn't enough.